Okay, religion in the First Amendment, which consists of two items, establishment and free exercise. I am on page 89. The First Amendment contains two elements regarding religion and government. These elements are commonly referred to as the Establishment Clause and the Free Exercise Clause. The Establishment Clause states that Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion. The Free Exercise Clause prohibits the abridgment of citizens' freedom to worship or not to worship as they please. Sometimes these freedoms conflict. The government practice of providing chaplains on military bases is one example of this conflict. Some accuse the government of establishing religion in order to ensure that members of the armed forces can freely practice their religion. Usually, however, Establishment Clause and Free Exercise Clause raise different kinds of conflict. Religious issues and controversies have assumed importance in political debate in recent years. So it is not surprising that interpretations of the Constitution are intertwined with partisan politics. Some nations, such as Great Britain, have an established church that is officially supported by the government and recognized as a national institution. Some American colonies at one time had official churches, but the religious persecutions that incited many colonists to move to America discouraged the first Congress from establishing a national church in the United States. Thus, the First Amendment prohibits an established national religion. It is much less clear, however, what else the first Congress intended to include in the Establishment Clause. Some people argue that it meant only that the government could not favor one religion over another. In contrast, Jefferson argued that the First Amendment created a wall of separation between church and state, forbidding not just favoritism, but also any support for religion at all. These interpretations continue to provoke argument, especially when religion is mixed with education, as occurs with such issues as government aid to church-related schools and prayer in public schools. Proponents, people who support, of aid to church-related schools argue that it does not favor any specific religion. Some opponents reply that the Roman Catholic Church has by far the largest religious school system in the country and gets most of the aid. It was LBJ, a Protestant, who in 1965 obtained the passage of the first substantial aid to parochial elementary and secondary schools. He argued that the aid went to students, not schools, and thus should go wherever the students were, including church-related schools. Interesting enough, though, the Roman Catholic Church has such a large religious school program because Catholics, especially immigrants who are Catholic, did not want to put their kids in public schools because public schools did have religion and it was Protestant religion. So there was religion, it was Protestant, and now when we talk about, rights and such, it's kind of gone to a different argument. So, in case you need to know, again, there are many cases that create tests, T-E-S-T-S, tests. There is no yelling fire in a crowded theater test. That's not a test, it's rhetoric. Test, like is whether or not provides guidance on whether or not the government is violating the Bill of Rights. So this is the Lemon test. In Lemon v. Kurtzman, 1971, the court declared that laws that provide aid to church-related schools must do the following. 1, have a secular or non-religious legislative purpose. For example, money for safety, money for playgrounds. It's secular, it's not religious. Have a primary effect that neither advances nor inhibits religion. So providing money for safety doesn't help religion nor hurt religion. It's neutral. 3, not foster an excessive government entanglement with religion. If that sounds vague, it is. Since Lemon, the court has had to draw a line between aid that is permissible and aid that is not. For instance, the court has allowed religiously affiliated colleges and universities to use public funds for buildings, textbooks, computers, and other instructional equipment. provide lunches and transportation to and from school, and administer standardized tests. However, schools may not use public funds to pay teacher salaries or to provide transportation for students on field trips. The theory, I don't like the word theory there, the motivation underlying these decisions is that it is possible to determine that buildings, textbooks, lunches, school buses, and tests are not used to support sectarian education, religious education. However, determining how teachers handle a subject in class or focus a field trip may require complex and constitutionally impermissible regulation of religion. We don't have this happening right now, but in the past, we have paid, Fruitport Community Schools have paid the salaries of some teachers who go to Calvary, like the music teacher, as a mutually beneficial financial cooperation between Fruitport Community Schools and Calvary Christian School. So it gets interesting to see how this stuff works. It is important loosening of its constraints on aid to parochial or religious schools. The court decided in 1997 that public school systems could send teachers into parochial schools to teach remedial and supplemental classes to needy children. In a landmark decision in 2002, the court upheld a program that provided some families in Cleveland, Ohio, with vouchers they could use to pay tuition at religious schools. By far, this conservative court has more and more allowed religion in public school, in public events, public meaning government ran, not public like you can go to it. Public events, public meeting, government meetings, and money to go to private schools, religious schools in particular. We can talk about the controversies on that in class. Religious activities in public schools. In recent decades, the Supreme Court has also been opening public schools to religious activities. The court decided that public universities that permit student groups to use their facilities must allow student religious groups on campus to use the facilities for religious worship. In 1984, Equal Access Act, so this is a statute, Congress made it unlawful for any public high school receiving federal funds to keep student groups from using school facilities for religious worship if the school opens its facilities for other student meetings. In 2001, the court extended this principle to public elementary schools. Similarly, in 1993, the court required public schools that rent facilities to secular or non-religious organizations to do the same for religious groups. Beyond the use of school facilities, there is the question of the use of public money, funds, for religious activities in public school contexts. In 1995, the court held that the University of Virginia was constitutionally required to subsidize a student religious magazine on the same basis as other student publications. However, in 2004, the court held that the state of Washington could exclude students pursuing a devotional theology degree from its general scholarship program. The threshold of constitutional acceptability becomes higher when public funds are used more directly for education. The school authorities may not permit religious instructors to come into public school buildings during the school day to provide religious education, although they may release students from part of the compulsory school day to receive religious instruction elsewhere. So you get on a bus, and we've done that. The school has seen this happen. You get on a school bus and go to the church. They take you to church. Actually, I don't even know if it's a school bus, but you go to church during the day and then you come back. Two particularly contentious topics related to religion in public schools are school prayer and the teaching of alternatives to the theory of evolution. I don't think evolution is a theory. Okay, it's not a law yet in scientific vocabulary. School prayer, Engel v. Vitale, probably. You have to know this one for the AP test. And then School District Pennsylvania versus Schempp, 62 and 63. The court aroused the wrath of many Americans by ruling that requiring public school students to recite a prayer violates the Establishment Clause. of favoring a one religion over another. In the second case, it made a similar ruling about requiring students to recite passages from the Bible. In the 63 decision, the justices observed that the place of religion in our society is an exalted one. But in the relationship between man and religion, the state is firmly committed to the position of neutrality. What's interesting, I would note about this too, the Establishment Clause isn't about denying people the right to religion. It's about keeping government, protecting religion. The original intent is to protect religion from government. So when the government supports prayer and Bible study in school, the government is picking, interpreting the value of certain prayers and certain passages, which could actually hinder free exercise of religion. And also it's preferring or creating it's not protecting religion from government, because government is intertwined. We can talk about that more in class. It is not unconstitutional, of course, to pray in public schools. Students may pray silently as much as they wish. What the Constitution forbids is a sponsorship, or correction, what the court's ruling on the Constitution forbids is the sponsorship or encouragement of prayer, directly or indirectly by public school authorities. Thus, the court has ruled that school-sponsored prayer at a public school graduation and student-led prayer at football games are unconstitutional. When several Alabama laws authorize public schools to hold 1-minute periods of silence for meditation or voluntary prayer, the court rejected its approach because the state made it clear that the purpose of the statute was to return prayer to public schools. It'd be interesting how, given the conservativeness of the current court, if this came in front of the court again, what their ruling would be. Many school districts have simply ignored the Supreme Court's ban on school prayer and continue to allow prayers in their classrooms. Some religious groups and many members of Congress, especially conservative Republicans, have pushed for a constitutional amendment permitting prayer in school. A majority of the public consistently supports school prayer. I would be curious what the numbers are on this today. Evolution. Fundamentalist and evangelical Christian groups have pressed some state legislatures to require or mandate the teaching of, quote, creation science. Their alternative to Darwin's theory, it's not just Darwin's, I don't know why people say that, but the theory of evolution in public schools. Louisiana, for example, passed a law requiring schools that taught Darwinism theory, it's not Darwinism theory, it's evolution, to teach creation science too. In 1987, the Supreme Court ruled that this law violated the Establishment Clause. The court had already held that states cannot prohibit the teaching of evolution from being taught in the public schools. More recently, some groups have advocated as an alternative to evolution, quote, intelligent design. The view that living things are too complicated to have resulted from natural selection and thus must be the result of an intelligent cause. Although they claim that their belief has no religious implications, lower courts have begun to rule that requiring teachers to present intelligence design as an alternative to evolution is a constitutionally unacceptable promotion of religion in the classroom. Because evolution is scientific, it's based on the rules of science, including observation and including scientific method, etc. So it's in a science evolution, and the ideas of evolution are in science. Just to know, you can cover alternatives in other classes. The ideas of intelligent design have not been shown to be follow the requirements of science, which is observation, scientific method, etc. And therefore, the argument goes it belongs in another class. Just like you can teach religion in school, you just cannot, we can teach the Bible, we can teach it as literature, we can teach it as an idea, you just can't teach it as, you can't minister with it in public school. Public displays. The court has also struggled to interpret the Establishment Clause in other areas. In 2005, the court found that 2 Kentucky counties violated the Establishment Clause when they posted large, readily visible copies of the 10 Commandments in their courthouses, concluding that the county's primary purpose was to advance religion. However, the court did not hold that it is never constitutional for a government body to integrate a sacred text, or sacred to those people who follow it, constitutionally into a governmental display on law or history. Thus, in 2005, the court held that Texas could include a monolith inscribed with the 10 Commandments among the 21 historical markers and 17 monuments surrounding the Texas state capitol. The court argued that a display that simply has religious content or promotes a message consistent with a religious doctrine does not run afoul on the Establishment Clause. Texas's placement of the Commandments Monument on its Capitol grounds was a far more passive use of those texts than their posting in elementary school classrooms, and also served a legitimate historical purpose. The court has also upheld saying a prayer to open a legislative session. To note, there's also a difference between exposure to children and exposure to adults. Think of 5-year-olds, 6-year-olds, 7-year-olds, and what they are exposed to when it comes to religion versus an adult, or even, I would say, a teenager in high school. Your religion has been shaped by your parents, by if you go to church or if you go to a synagogue, etc., by them as well. And so by the time you're an adult and someone says a prayer, you're not going to be as, there's not as much of a promotion by the government as there is when it's like a 5-year-old. That's been a common understanding as well. Displays of religious symbols during the holidays have prompted considerable controversy. In 1984, the court found that Pawtucket, Rhode Island could set up a Christmas nativity, that's the manger, Jesus in the manger, scene on public property, along with Santa's house and sleigh, Christmas trees, and other symbols of the Christmas season. 5 years later, the court extended the principle to Hanukkah menorah, those are the candles, placed next to a Christmas tree. The court concluded that these displays had a secular, non-religious purpose and provided little or no benefit to religion. At the same time, the court invalidated the display of a nativity scene in a courthouse because it was not accompanied by secular symbols and thus gave the impression of endorsing a religious message. So it's a lot about perception of intent. If your intent is to endorse solely Christianity, then arguably it is not secular. It is promoting or establishing by promoting one religion. But if you put it with other religious displays or even the non-religious Christmas decorations, then you're not, the argument goes, it's more about the holidays and you're not promoting one particular religious thought over others. The court's basic, now I would say in Michigan, our rules are in the state capitol, you can put stuff up, but it has to be taken down at night. It can't stay. And so you can go put a nativity scene up for a day, bring it down, bring it back on the state capitol buildings, but you have to accept that other religions, as well as those who are against religion, can put up theirs as well. For freedom of speech. The court's basic position is that the Constitution does not require complete separation of church and state. It mandates or requires accommodation of all religions and forbids hostility towards any. At the same time, the Constitution forbids government endorsement of religious beliefs. Drawing the line between neutrality toward religion and promotion of it is not easy. This dilemma ensures that cases involving the establishment of religion will continue to come before the court. In general, if I had to guess, based on current and past, relatively current rulings, passed not so long ago, it's okay to have religion in government meetings, even school, as long as you're not picking one over the other, as long as the tolerance is there for others. And then age, again, children that can come into play. That's establishment. which originally mean the national government will not create a formal religion like the Church of England. Now it is meant to interpret government will not favor one religion over another. Okay, moving on to the free exercise clause. And I will start that on the next one.